Welcome. In this video, we will discuss a very important policy which was recently presented the draft for. It is your defense production and export promotion policy. So now if you have been following news, recently we got a deal with France and were able to procure 5 Rafale planes. But if you look at the time and the amount and efforts which goes into procuring different defense vehicles from throughout the world is actually pretty huge. In fact, India is one of the largest importer of defense vehicle, largest importer of defense weapons in the world. So this means that a lot of GDP of our as a percentage is spent on procuring weapons from outside the world. Now the thing is, you have to remember that this kind of defense production and export promotion policy will provide a benefit towards the innovation which could happen in India, technical know-how, and as well as it can also lead to the better Make in India campaign. So these are the few reasons why this particular defense production and export promotion policy 2020 is very important for the defense sector as well as the overall economy and security concerns of India as well. So now let's try to see what major points of this particular policy are. So first of all, what are the basic criteria where it will actually pay more attention to? So it's going to look for focus, structure and significant thrust to defense production capabilities. So this is one of the very major area where it's going to focus, that it's not only going to go for defense production, but it will go for a more focused structure and significant, so that India could actually become self-reliant and can eventually lead to the exports. So these kind of things are envisioned within this policy. Now, one thing to remember is that as of now, share of domestic procurement in overall defense procurement is about 16% now. So the how much is domestic procurement, like the HAL, your DRDO and your other organization which provides the systems to the defense, is 60% as of now. And considering what this particular policy envision, it has to be doubled to rupees 1.47 lakh, which is exactly the double. So to reach the point of 1.4 lakh crores, it has to be double by 2025. So that's an ambitious target that they have to work towards. We have 5 years now to work towards doubling at 1.4 lakh crores. So that is the one thing which presently this defense policies talk about. Now, what exactly another factor, a very important factor which is talks about, is actually to move away from license production. So like instead of going for the licensed product, which will again will not be able to get your intellectual property rights over, we have to move away from the license production to design, develop and produce indigenously and own design right and intellectual property of the system. This is where it is projected in long term integrated perspective plan. So there is something called as long term integrated perspective plan, where the defense policy talks about that we have to move away from the licensed product and focus more on designing indigenous products which are based on the intellectual property, so we can also have the intellectual property right, and when we eventually go for exports, we can have the intellectual property rights within the nation. So that is one of the very important factor this particular policy talked about, and to do that it set up a technology assessment cell, which is TAC. So basically this policy says that a technology assessment cell TAC would be set up, so that for long-term integrated perspective plan we can move away from the licensed product and slowly towards the IP products. So that is one of the very major finding of this policy. Now let's move forward and see what are the basic aims and objectives which are defined for this policy. So let's see the objective. So one of the major objective of this policy is that we have to achieve a turnover of 1.7 lakh crores, which is a staggering amount. We have to become profitable. We have to get to a point where we can get a turnover of not less than 1.7 lakh crore. And this is not only in production, we are going to get even 35,000 crores in exports as well. So like we have to start exporting our product to other countries also. In fact, India has a neighborhood which is like dependent on India to some extent for its defense. Even though we have hostile neighborhood in terms of Pakistan and China, we also have neighborhood which are kind of dependent on us in terms of their security concern, and in that particular aspect itself we can move and push forward towards the export policy. And hence this particular policy talks about that 35,000 crore need to comes from the your area of export. Now this also talks about to develop a dynamic, robust and competitive. So you don't have to have a rigid framework where only one kind of methodology is going to work. You have to shift towards more dynamic and robust, as well as you have to go towards the competitive defense industry. So this is one of the feature which this policy lays emphasis on, that we have to move towards that. And let's not just only focus upon weapons or the systems which are related to the defense directly, but we have to move beyond and look into the space of aerospace, which this policy consider is a very potent space, and a lot of potential is there for India to grow production over here. It also talks about something called as naval shipbuilding. So instead of just focusing on weapons, it's saying that we have to focus on the area which are yet not tapped properly, or they have not reached their full potential, and where India could actually grow. So this is one of the things, again an objective this policies talk about. Then a next thing, a very major component is it will give push towards the Make in India campaign. So Make in India campaign is the flagship scheme of the present government. This particular scheme talks about that how India should focus more towards the self-reliance. So in fact, if you have heard the PM's speech of during this COVID time, he has specifically talked about how India should become Atmanirbhar. And Atmanirbhar is not only in the sense of producing other goods, but very much self-reliant in terms of defense and security, especially in the words of present era where there are a lot of tension and rivalry, as well as a situation of espionage, security espionage, cyber attacks. It is very important that the technology through which the weapons and security systems are developed in country are developed within it. So this is again a very important point which is raised by this policy. Now it also specifically talks about how we have to promote exports of defense products. So as mentioned earlier, this is going to be a huge component of this policy, that not only the production, but we also have to start going towards the export of the products that we are building. Now again a very important thing it talks about, so nothing comes, no innovation, nothing will come up by just replicating the things which have already been developed by certain other countries. What we have to go for is to actually go into the era of innovation, and we have to go towards that where we are rewarding the innovation, so that more people could come in and join this particular venture. So it specifically talk about that we have to go for encouraging research and development, a very important component. And if we really want to make India self-sufficient in terms of its technology also, it is very important that we provide enough provisions for the research and development in the sector of defense. So these are few objectives which this particular policy talks about. Now if you see, there are other things that it's talk about. Specifically it asks to focus on MSME and startup. So to give impetus to the economy, it could consider as one of the important factor which will provide impetus to the economy, as well as it will also provide the much needed expertise or the labor which is needed to produce the state of art weaponry. So this is one of the factor which again this policy says that we have to focus more support on MSME and startup. Optimization of resource allocation is also very important because these are heavy weaponry and include a lot of development costs. So resource optimization is very important. Then ease of doing business. So ease of doing business will eventually help not only the people, the startups within the country, but if somebody from outside they want to invest, the ease of doing business is very much important to provide kind of environment which is needed to develop the domestic defense sector in India. Obviously, FDI and investment norms also need to be tweaked so that we could provide the most feasible way by which the investment from outside India could invest in Indian ventures. And obviously we have to focus towards the R&D and export promotion. So these are the major points which this policy talks about. It is a very important policy. Defense sector at present is in real demand to provide kind of impetus towards the domestic production. We have in organization like HAL, we have DRDO, then we also have naval laboratory which actually takes care of shipbuilding. So all these things have to be provide the right amount of focus, and they should work on a structured way so that we can become self-reliant in terms of defense weaponry also. So I hope you have understood this video. If you have any doubt, please comment. Thank you.